Good. Okay. So I think I know most of you, but I definitely don't know all of you. My name is Rob King. I run a company called King Property. This is the property meetup. That was originally going to be an in-person, face-to-face property networking meeting run in Southampton. But for reasons that I think we all understand, obviously that's not possible. I started investing 17 years ago and sort of started taking it seriously a bit more like 5 years ago as the buy-to-let portfolio grows. Still my favorite way of investing, doing buy-to-let investing, no money left in if you can. I've got into development in the last 5 years as well. So we have a few sort of small to medium sites. We've got a 15-unit site, which is just going into construction, a 12-unit site, which is on the way through, an 8 and a 10, which are near each other being built by a builder, and a 4-unit site around the corner from those. So we have a fair number of sites in progress, and for which you can translate, we are in the doo-doo a little bit because of the current situation. Thankfully, we have the buy-to-let portfolio, which I've been building slowly as well. And doing a bit of coaching and mentoring type thing and on the quiet at the same time. I used to co-host something called Southampton Property Meet with Sarah Smith, which we ran for a few years and grew to, at one point we touched the largest property meeting in the country. That was more about timing. We got to 110, but consistently got 80 people in the room. And not being, and this was supposed to be a relaunch of an in-person meeting, not being able to do it in person, I thought, well, what better way to get people together than via Zoom? And having had lots of conversations, one-on-one conversations with individual investors, people, large portfolios, small portfolios, specific individual problems, tenants doing things, mortgage companies doing things, people not understanding the situation. I thought it was a good opportunity for us all to get together. I have gathered a number of experts from different walks of life. Experts in inverted commas, some people incredibly experienced, some people at the other end of the journey who are a bit more relatable. And whilst doing that, it did occur to me that Paul Million of The Property Thing, hopefully Paul is here with us still now, who runs a very interesting, very successful group, both online and in person, which is called The Property Thing. I thought had a very interesting audience who might also want to join in. So we have collaborated between Southampton, which is where my base, and Darlington, two parts of the world which physically quite far away, but I think we have a lot in common in terms of our investing style. So before we do a quick round table for our experts, what I'd like to do is just ask Paul, are you there? Can you say hello, Paul?
Can you hear me?
We can hear you and we can now see you. Excellent.
Fantastic. Thanks for the intro. So, yeah, I'm Paul Million from Darlington. I started in buy-to-lets in the early 90s and built that for about 4 years and then left it while I did my own house up on evenings and weekends and while I was working full-time. So got the property addiction fairly early. But in that 3 or 4 year period, my house prices went up quite nicely. So I was able to remortgage and ended up buying a few more and just kind of kept going with the buy-to-let portfolio until I was able to leave work. So I've got quite a lot of experience with quite a lot of different types of tenants. Went a bit crazy in 02, 03, 04, buying about 12 or 14 houses a year. And then rather than let everything settle, by the time I got to about 2008, I decided to build some industrial units. And we all know what happened in 2008. And I've reiterated this story a few times. So the world started collapsing just as I was constructing, and I thought, have I jeopardized everything that I've done over the last few years? But I mean, I can talk more about that in a bit if you'd like me just to intro. So at the moment, I'm looking at some. Got over the recession. I've actually had I always say in every adversity lies a seed of a greater benefit. People in my group will be going, oh, right now, because I say that rather a lot, but I do think there's opportunity in these times, and I think you've got to remain positive. Can you still hear me?
Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
I just saw Rob going on his phone now. I thought he was ringing me to say.
No, we can hear you.
Right, cool in the gang. Stop making phone calls, you.
He was ordering his dinner.
That was me getting confirmation of planning permission. So I'm happy, very happy to do that.
Oh, congratulations.
That was awesome.
Well done, Rob.
So since 2008, since that crash, I'll tell you why in a bit, but I've ended up building a portfolio of, with a business partner in supported tenancies, also done some of my own stuff, and also went back into my portfolio and turned rather a lot of my portfolio into HMOs. So I'm fairly experienced in HMOs as well. And I'm a pretty good sounding block for people in my group and all over Facebook. And I've made some, I've only been networking actually, really, probably about a year. We had some networking groups that closed down, and we thought, what we're going to do? So a friend of mine, Anthony Boyce, and I, who had met through networking, decided to do our network. And I've met more fantastic, educated, brilliant people. I've been what we call up north, head down, arse up, for 27 years of my portfolio journey. And I've actually had my head above the parapet, having a good look around over the last year, and met some fantastic people, and do the commercial mentoring, for which you are one of my mentors, Rob. So thanks for that, and thanks for the invite. I look forward to hearing everyone else's stories as well.
Pleasure. Thank you for bringing your people together. So in no particular order, I will start to go round the people who have kindly and bravely offered to provide some help or advice. I know there are lots of other people on this call who have very good, solid experience, some incredible amount of experience that I know I can't hold a candle to. So I'm very, very grateful to that. In order to get to the Q&A, I'll please, let's just have a short intro, and I'll keep this to a relatively short list, though there are some phenomenal people on here. Shall we start with Michael Primrose? Did you manage?
Evening, everyone.
Hi.
Yes,
Michael.
I'm not going to share video if that's all right. I think
Because you're sitting in your pants in your dressing gown.
well, actually, what I was going to say is it's a scary enough time without having to see me. So that's fine. Yeah, so very quick introduction about me. I'm a commercial finance broker specialising in bridging and development. Some of you may have heard of my brand, which is the Property Finance Guy. But actually, as of yesterday, we actually rebranded to the Property Finance Collective, because there's more than just me now. Yeah, we've done a fair bit of finance, really. And yeah, so obviously very happy to have been invited on tonight, really just to talk about what lenders are up to, what's happening out there, really, because I know it's quite a scary time, and there's a lot of false information out there as well. So I literally, I think I've spent the last 48 hours with the phone glued to my ear, talking to CEOs, managing directors, all sorts of heads of funding lines, just to actually understand what's going on out there. Because as I'm sure many of you will appreciate, there are a lot of Facebook bandits, shall we call them, who love to share a doom and gloom story now and again. And it is not all doom and gloom. It's not quite as bad as some people are making out. There's definitely some creaking going on, but it's not quite as bad as I think people make out. But yeah, I'll keep the intro short and yeah, let you move on to the next.
Great, thank you very much, Michael. Really appreciate you joining. Jon Woodman, are you with us?
Yeah, I'm back. Sorry, I disappeared. It cut me off.
Hi, Jon.
Yeah, so for those that don't know, we run 26 service accommodation units. So yeah, times are interesting right now.
Yeah.
Not many people travelling. Not many people staying away from home. So yeah, we're all over that at the moment, as well as looking at various finance options, what's out there in terms of grant funding, support, and all those good things, but also chasing any lead that we can possibly get our hands on. Trying to work with the NHS, and and a couple of other providers around as well. So yeah, just head down and trying to keep afloat for the next couple of months, and kind of hopeful that actually it'll be a couple of months, and once we're through this, if we get through this, then it'll be happy days. But yeah, interesting next 8 weeks would be my take.
Thank you for being on and offering to share. Karen Gregory.
Hi, Rob. Hi, everybody. Thank you very much for inviting me along. My name is Karen Gregory, and I trade as the ethical landlady because I try to be as much as possible. And I'm also the London South representative for the National Landlord Association, soon to be rebranded and merged with the Residential Landlord Association. So I hope I can try and help answer questions that some people might have on what's happening, obviously, at the moment, with many tenants obviously feeling that they can be asking us landlords for a break in terms of a holiday, paying the rent. I'm sure some of us will have experienced that already. And hopefully, if I don't know the answer, I can point you to some good information that the NLA, the National Landlord Association, has got up already on its website. So I hope that helps. I'm an experienced landlord myself. I have a small portfolio of buy-to-let properties here in London, and I obviously look after a number of other landlords' properties, mostly here in London as well, under my Ethical Landlady brand. So hopefully I can perhaps try and help some of you who are perhaps wondering what to do next.
Great, thank you very much, Karen. I will moving swiftly on. Jim, are you with us, Jim?
I'm here. Thanks for having me. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm Jim Cooper. I with my partner Leanne, we run a portfolio of largely student HMOs in a lovely place called Winchester. But I'm also the host of the Winchester Property Meetup, which sadly didn't quite get itself online in time, as Rob has done this evening. So I've got a corporate background, but I've been investing in property for and just happy to offer whatever pearls of wisdom. Certainly, we're going through some stuff at the moment with trying to renew all of our contracts when people are not in our HMOs at all, but they've rushed off home to mum and dad for the time being. So interesting times for us as well.
Thank you. Thanks, Jim. Dan Fitzhenry?
Hello, Rob. Hello, everybody. So hopefully you can all hear me because I'm getting more and more familiar. Good, excellent. By the day with Zoom technology. It's amazing how your life can change in a week on the technology basis. So good to see you all. Rob and I have known each other for a few years now, and we did some property sourcing. But our main business activity that I'm involved in is we're a business and property finance brokerage, but we spend most of our time in the business financing sector and then do a little bit of property financing on the side. Obviously, the last week has been really about trying to help people understand what support is out there, and fielding a lot of questions around what support are the government going to bring in, not only over the last week for along business rates and cash grants, and then the business interruption loans and the job support facility via HMRC, and the likely announcement later this week of support for self-employed individuals as well. So an awful lot. A lot of what I'm doing at the moment, we're doing, is spreading some love and giving some hope to people and just saying, look, actually, there is help out there. There are people that want to help you. And if any of us can help anyone in any way, then that's what we're here to do. So I've never had a job. I've only created and built businesses, grown them up, come out the other end. Lots of things have gone well and lots of things have gone terribly wrong. So if I can help anybody this evening with financing chat, conversations about where you're at, or information and advice that you need, please shout. Thank you. Thanks, Rob.
Dan, do you want to mention your local government credentials?
Yeah. So for my sins, I'm a councillor in Southampton. I'm the leader of the Conservative Party stroke group on Southampton City Council. So we are in opposition. So a lot of my political work now is working with the leader of the council here, which is Labour, to ensure that we can effectively make sure our residents, businesses, and anybody who needs us right now is looked after the best way we can. And that's our top priority. So it allows me to understand some of the complicated stuff that's going on in the national and local government sector, albeit I get as equally as confused by it as everyone else. So, but if you've got any questions or you need access to people in whatever local council you are around the country, please shout, and if I can help, I'll be happy to do so.
I thought it'd be particularly interesting to have Dan on because he's through that activity, he's bound to be at least as up to speed as the rest of us, possibly more so in terms of what the government is doing and what they're offering. They're clearly changing minute by minute, day by day, so that's a pretty hard task. Okay, thank you very much, Dan. I'm going to keep moving on swiftly. Rob Hodge.
Hi, Rob.
Hi.
Hello, Rob.
Thank you very much for having me. So yeah, I'm Rob. I run a company called Green Investments with my wife, Sarah. So we focus on high-end HMOs. We've got a portfolio of about 40 units up in Manchester. I'm based down in Hampshire, so we're remote investors, which obviously has its challenges. We've got 14 rooms that have literally just come onto the market in the last. So we've been doing a lot of scrambling around this week, trying to get in touch with, in fact, actually trying to get in touch with the NHS to see if there was something we could do to help the large amount of doctors and nurses that are going to be required across the different hospitals in the area. So that's something I've been doing. We very much focus on design and tenant experience. So that's kind of been our thing, really. We do a lot with outsourcing. We use virtual assistants on a day-to-day basis in our business to keep the business rolling. So they've been doing some different things for us now over this period, which has been interesting. Yeah, and social media is another big thing for us. We've really used Instagram to grow a brand over the years that we've been doing this, and that's really helped certainly attract people to us. And interestingly, one thing I've found, even though obviously this is such a difficult time, inquiries for new investors for us seem to be like at an all-time high. So, you know, there are people out there that are interested in investing still, even with what's going on. So, and a lot of that has come from really just building a brand, you know, using social media and that sort of things.
Thanks, Rob. And I'll say it for you. Congratulations to Rob and Sarah. They are 3 weeks in to a newborn.
Yeah, so on top of everything else, we've got a 2-week-old baby.
Wow.
2 weeks. Congratulations.
Yeah, so I'm
annoyingly youthful and awake, Rob.
Yeah, well, I don't know how I'm doing it. I'm running on about 3 hours sleep.
Well done. Well done. Okay. I thought it might be useful to have someone from outside of the business, of the property world and in the business world. Karen Murray, would you like to say hello?
Hi everyone, yeah, lovely to be here, and I know these are challenging times, so some of you know me, some of you don't. I'm a business coach. I'm probably best known for blending, being really methodical about your business, creating process-driven business that smooths out some of the bumps, with focusing on the mindset side of business ownership. So that's a little bit from me. I'm going to keep it really short so that you can get right into your Q&A. But if you are wrestling with business questions or what's going on at the moment, then do get in touch.
Thank you very much, Karen. It obviously this is related to this conversation. I know lots of the challenges we're having with them coming to that. Could I please just ask?
Rob, it might just be me, but you've gone a bit muffled.
Yeah, me too.
You sound like you're underwater.
Yeah.
Can you speak again, see what happened?
Okay. It sounds like it was actually me. Is it me who is being noisy? Is that better?
Yeah, you were a bit muffled. Your voice, you sounded like you were underwater, but that sounds a bit better now.
Okay, sorry about that. Okay. Still all quiet. Are we all better now? Good.
You're a bit
just quite quiet.
Very quiet. I don't know if I can help that at all, to be honest.
Speak louder, maybe.
Tim, ever helpful. Great. Thank you, Karen. Always useful to have a business perspective, and Karen always has interesting insights. So not to outshadow us all, I've left someone with incredible experience and towards the end. Rich Liddle, would you like to say hello?
Yeah, good evening, everybody. So myself, I'll keep this brief as well, like everybody. Rob, thanks for having me, and Paul, thanks for the last minute invite this afternoon. So you've got Paul Million to blame for me coming on. I've been in property now for, again, back in 2003 is when I first started building up HMOs in Glasgow. So did a lot in Scotland at that time, Glasgow, Somerset, Bristol, Edinburgh, which then ended up back in York, which is where I live now, and a large in Hull, which is where I operate now. Covered all sorts of sectors in that sense. I now run an online group called Blue Oak, who hopefully you've all heard of. If not, then please get on that on Facebook, Blue Oak Property Group, where we are basically just open, honest, and ethical is our strapline. I take a view of the property market potentially different to a lot of other people. I will say it how it is, and I think some of that will probably come up tonight. If people ask me where I think the market is going.
Rich, sorry, I just want to, Rich, can I just pause you? Sorry, I just want to try and sort out the noise problems. So I'm just going to mute everybody and then I'll mute you, Rich.
Okay.
Okay, so hopefully we've just got rid of all that extra feedback now. So what I've done is mute everybody.
Probably still hear me? Are we good? Yeah.
I've just muted everybody else so that you can carry on now.
Yeah. And covering a huge range of tenant demographics from the professional all the way down to social housing and the homeless. So I've got a huge spectrum in that, and I target depending on where the market is to what I put in my properties. I use a lot of leases, a lot of social housing, a lot of also supported living. I'm just in a development now, which I always find funny that it's classed as age restricted, i.e. they must be sold to the over 55s, but there's some huge margins in that, and that's an area which I'm happy to discuss with people. Paul asked me to come on tonight and hopefully discuss my view of the market itself. I think it'd be interesting, myself and Michael, from a broker's point of view, where I think this is going. I look far further afield than just the UK to get my signals to what I think is going to go on. And yeah, happy to answer any questions on anything property related, anything with regards to the market and the current situation as to where I. Thank you, Rob.
Great. Thank you very much, Rich. Is there anybody else? I'll offer it out. So I've muted you all, but you are able to unmute yourselves who wants to just mention their experience. Tim, would you like to say?
Yeah, happy to. Yeah, very happy to. Hi, everybody. Hi, Rob. Me on here, but I suspect if there's about 70, then most people won't. I'm actually a musician. You'll laugh when I tell you the 4 industries I work in. So music, which is absolutely screwed. Travel, which is absolutely screwed. Hospitality, which is absolutely screwed. And property, which so far isn't for me, but I do very small things. So I've got a couple of service accommodation and a couple of buy-to-lets. I had a tricky time just recently where the buy-to-lets decided they were going back to their countries, so that was that. But I've managed to sort that temporarily. And I've got a big refurb project going on, a sort of no money left in type deal. So far, my builders are working till Friday. So I've just been down there tonight to check what they've done wrong today, which they can put right tomorrow. So it's all that sort of thing. And I think my biggest skill really, and Facebook prompted me yesterday to update my profile, and it said, you know, what do you do?
And I put down optimist and optimizer. So if I can help anybody being optimistic or optimize a shitty situation they're in, I'm so happy to do so. That's about it.
Thank you very much, Tim. Tej, I think you're on. We haven't met personally, but as your internet podcasting famous, I thought I might give you an opportunity to say hello.
Hey everyone, my name is Tej. Let me try and put on the video. The lighting's not very good where I'm at, so I need like a haircut and thing. Thank you so much for giving me an introduction. My name is Tej. I have a podcast called Tej Talks. Normally it's on my shirt, but I'm not wearing yellow today. Yeah, what should I say about myself? I've purchased a few buy-to-lets in the past few months, and I'm in a position where I'm sort of trying to balance it all and ensure that what goes out is maybe less than, well, to make what's coming in more than what's going out. So I'm here really to learn from these industry experts that you have about how to deal with the current situation. And listen to my podcast, everyone. A few people on there have been on it.
Listen to Tej's podcast. Great. Thank you very much. Okay, we spent a long time on introductions. Hopefully we have a good set of questions coming up now. I'm not going to particularly push questions at anybody. If there's a particular person you would like to answer your question, feel free to mention. Otherwise, those people who just introduced themselves, I will give you the opportunity to speak. Just freely shout up if you have something to say. Let's just try and all take it in turn. So we have a wealth of experience on the call today. We've got people from mortgages, serviced accommodation, NLA, experienced agents. We've got someone who understands local government as a local councillor. We've got HMO landlords. We've got student landlords. We've got remote landlords. We've got people who are very experienced across a broad range. We've got developers. We've got a business coach. We've got people who operate sites remotely, properties remotely. We've got a huge range of experience. So now is a good opportunity to get your questions out. And panel, please don't be shy about answering. You might just need to then be a little bit polite about who goes when. So can I now open the floor for the first question? Before I do that, please remember to stay muted while you're not talking. That'll be really helpful. We're all experimenting with Zoom here. I would open the floor for the first question. If anybody would like to just speak up and try and ask the first question, or you can always type it on chat. Who would like to go first?
Could I just say, Rob, it might be Rich has done some really good lives lately on Blue Oak, explaining how he foresees the future and things to look out for in economic conditions and a lot of the factors involved in what's actually happening. I'd like to ask Rich, if that's all right, to have 5 minutes on his take on things, if that's all right.
Thank you, Paul. Right. Where I think things are, economic conditions and what we're going to see coming forward. Now, obviously, it's where we are right now is uncharted territory. I think everyone will agree with that. What's going on is uncharted. A lot of people likened it. There's two types of market crash, whether that become economical or whether that be property. And they can effectively, this one was deemed initially, when you read into the economist element, that it was deemed the terrorist angle. And what I mean by that is it's a sharp act in time that causes everything to drop off. And generally that's cause for fear post an act. What I'm getting at there is if we look back to kind of 9/11, post 9/11, one sharp act in time, things then changed. Now, I can talk a lot about markets. I can talk a lot about where we are. The markets, everybody sees daily things about the stock markets going on at the moment. And everyone thinks, well, I'm in property, it's not going to affect me. Okay, well, I think that's a very narrow-minded view. Now, what I don't want to do is kind of scare people, because I have a much broader view of what's going on than potentially I've got time to talk about here. But the most interesting thing that I look at is a thing called the US 30, which is, and if I want to show you how often I look at it, so we can look at it here right now on my screen, okay? And I monitor that. And if I can just show you why this worries me, okay? I'm just going to try and show you, this isn't ideal, but if we look at this, I don't know if anybody else looks at charts like this. This here, the way I'm pointing to my pencil, was the 2008 property market crash, okay? From this point here, from the peak to the bottom, was from the first 2008 to the second 2009, yeah? So if we look at that, it's about so big. Now we look at what's just happened, it's slightly greater, and that's happened within 3 months, okay? Now why that's important, you might think, why the hell's Richard looking at the US, which is the industrial average? Because the US dollar is pegged against the industrial average. And what does the World Bank work in is the US dollar. What are 90% of, so a lot of the world's economical cycles are based on the US dollar and the US 30. Now, the reason I look at that is if that breaks a certain point, it will just continue to fall. So that's me looking at the big picture. Okay, so then let's look back in the UK. You've got to ask yourself what drives house prices. Okay, so what drives house prices? A lot of people think it's interest rates. Well, we're at a world bottom of interest rates, what, 0.1%. Everybody said it would never drop below 0.25, but it was very obvious that it was. So interest rates, a lot of people think drive house prices. Supply and demand is the other one. So again, everybody thinks, well, the supply is not going, sorry, the demand is not going away. So therefore, supply and demand will still always noting that. But actually, what drives house prices is, quite frankly, the liquidity of money. It's the availability of money. The second the banks stop lending money and the second the banks start drying up or dropping their or increasing their criteria for lending, which I'm sure Michael will give it an introduction to shortly, then that's the point that house prices change. So where we are now already, I would say, and again, Michael will be able to give a different perspective, but certainly from the Blue Oak community that I run, I've had people reaching out to me left, right and centre saying, what should they do now? Because they've had offers pulled by banks, they've had criteria change from 75% LTV to potentially 50% LTV. Products and also valuations aren't being conducted, therefore it's extending that period, potentially leaving them on bridges for longer. So what's actually driven this? It's fear, and that's it. We are in a position now where actually the economic conditions the economy's crashed on fear, but the trouble is it's passing that point of no return. The government's come in and they've thrown £330 billion at it. They've thrown, where does that money come from? QE. And what I don't want to do is I could talk all these figures as we move on and I could keep talking, but the crux of it is what I see in the property market now is actually a relatively stable platform. I would have said last week. What do I see now? The fact that valuations now can't happen. Some may well be doing desktop valuations. And again, Michael Primrose is a better person to talk to about that. But I'm just talking about the factual people who come to me in Blue Oak. We've had a chap reached out to me the other day saying his £1 million debt finance had been pulled. And they've said, we'll reevaluate it in September. Okay, that's not helpful to anybody. But that's what's happened to him. Now, if this continues, we are putting ourselves on a teetering edge of the property market. The second factor is the people who are out there who aren't going through, who potentially are midway through conveyancing. Now, conveyancing's never been a blink and you'll miss it industry. It has always been a very slow industry. But so if you are mid-conveyance, the issue is I've had a lot of people, and again, many messages of people saying, is it wise me to pull out this property purchase now? Is it wise me just to cut my losses and get out now? Now, the more that happens, the more fear that's built into the market, and hence the cascade domino effect will happen within this property market. The more people who start to pull out of property deals and transactions, then that domino effect will continue to happen. And if I'm brutally honest, I do see that that's where we are now. The pound is becoming devalued. Yes, we've got record low interest rate, but the availability of money will start to dry up. And if I'm brutally honest, even if this washes over in now about 3 months, we're told it's going to be a minimum of 12 weeks. Let's look at the China model. That 3 months is going to have an effect on the property market. So what I would be doing, if I'm brutally honest, I would be continuing with, I'm doing a lot of due diligence. I'm doing a lot of looking at offers that I'd potentially put on the table earlier this year and revisiting them, retouching base with those offers and seeing where they are, basically just reigniting those conversations. I'm not jumping into bed with anybody just yet, because ultimately the refinancing elements are a little bit trickier at the moment to start from scratch. And I'm just sitting on my hands, quite frankly. I'm not rushing. Everybody's saying now is the time to invest. Now is not the time to invest. Now is the time to sit and do your research, do your due diligence, decide what you want to buy and at what price you will buy it when the time is right. But I do think the UK property market is in for a shock. I said about 4 years ago that we would do a correction in the UK property market at Q4 2020, okay? That was based on completely different economic factors to what we've got now. I just feel the trigger that's kicked this off has been coronavirus. Had coronavirus not happened, if I'm honest, I thought Brexit would have been the trigger. But the economic pattern that's meant we would do a correction in 2020 has been evident for the past 10 years. Okay, so this should not come as a shock that we are due a correction now. What is a shock is that actually the correction could well turn into a crash.
Rich, could you talk a little about, have you timed developments, refurbs, works, purchase such that you are in a position where you can sit on your hands now? Are you in the middle of anything and this has come 3 to 4 years a little earlier? Could you just talk about your personal business, your business circumstances around?
Yeah, so I talk a lot about, certainly within my group, that the money on anything, the money on any property purchase is made at the front end and not the back end. Okay, it's made at that front end analysis of the deal, and a lot of people will pay lip service to the analysis and they'll bring emotion into it. So they'll potentially say that is a fantastic opportunity. That will make a fantastic HMO. That will make this an emotional decision because it's in potentially an area that they like the look of it, but the facts may take a backbench, should we say, to the emotion. Where I'm a very brutal, facts are facts, okay? Emotions can paint whatever picture you want. So the money's always made at the front end, and I have my criteria of what I will go into on the deal. So what I would say to people, what I have been saying to people, is if they are midway through conveyancing, if they have done their analysis correctly and they have done the relevant sensitivity analysis that are required for whatever it is, whether that be a buy-to-let, a development, a rent-to-rent, a lease option, whatever, as long as they've done the correct analysis at the front end, then continue to purchase it, because we are in this for the long game. It is not a flash, flipping, potentially slightly different. I'd be pretty scared if I was in that game right now. But analysis at the front end. So where am I was the question from Rob. Yeah, I'm not in any new purchases whatsoever. I've acquired, and I wasn't going to purchase at all within 2020. I looked at a development, which I was outbid on, but that development had a 30% profit, developer's profit in it. So even when I did my sensitivity analysis on that, there was sufficient developer's profit in that to allow for anything really. I've taken on a number of options this year, and that's pretty much the only active driving forward of investment that I've done. This probably since summer last year. Yeah. And that wasn't me. That wasn't me thinking this big crash was going to happen, but that was me looking at my Q4 2020 prediction, which is something that I made based on other conditions. So that was me giving myself a 12-month window. To a lot of people who use the term, you've got to be liquid. Well, again, there's a lot of misunderstanding about what being liquid means, okay? Being liquid is not just about having money in the bank. You know, use your money for other things. So I would consider myself being liquid. So I've used pots of my money to potentially fund other developers when I'm comfortable with what they're in. They may have a large developer's profit. I may do short-term trades for stock market purchases or other subsequent purchases. That to me is still liquid money because it's available within a 6-month period. Okay, we're not tied in, but that's again another conversation. But me personally, yeah, I've stayed out of the large developments. I haven't stopped looking at all, and I'm still looking at a few, and I've got my eye on a few. I would get into one right now. I'd get into one tomorrow if that developer's profit was significant enough. And when I say significant enough, I'd be talking like the unicorn figures of around 30%.
Okay, thank you, Rich. I'm anxious to explore questions that are out there. I know there's lots more we could just keep talking about. Who's going to offer up the first question? Remember,
I'm happy to have a
Andy.
kick off, Rob. Rob, hi everybody. Rob, first of all, thanks ever so much for putting this together. Awesome opportunity to listen to experts, listen to other people, share our concerns. Most on this call I don't think are going to know me terribly well, so very briefly, the focus for me tonight is the mainstay of my income, which is HMOs. So I have a small portfolio of HMOs. They're all based around the professional market. And so I have individuals that come and go according to the commercial world that they work in. We have been finding filling rooms a little harder recently. It's got quite tough in our market. So even before the coronavirus issue, we were carrying 3 or 4 or 5 room vacancies. Since the crisis, we've had a few more leave our rooms because they've had to, because they've gone back to mum and dad maybe to sit this out, because for various reasons they've gone, and we're now up to 6 rooms vacant, which leaves us with quite a significant reduction in our profit. The business is still profitable, but it is reaching the stage where it is failing to support us in the income that we need from the business in order to keep ourselves afloat. So our predicament is, if you like, double-edged sword. Personally, our income is being decimated by the business. So although the business can survive at its current level, it's sort of needing its profit to look after itself rather than look after me. Today, we got a call from one of the tenants to say that as somebody who was self-employed, his income has dried up, and he would like to request a period of rent freeze. So he's requested a 3-month rent freeze. I've spoken to him in a little bit more detail, and he's actually said, well, even half of the rent frozen would help me out. He explained his situation. He's self-employed. He's a face-to-face hosts events face-to-face, and so in selling those events, his market has literally fallen off a cliff and dried up. So his income has dried up, albeit temporarily, he hopes. The challenge for me is how to respond to him. Interestingly, if I give him his freeze period, he's better off, and obviously I'm worse off. And the irony is, I'm not sure if I'm in a better position to give it as he's in a worse position to need it. Which of us needs it most? However, as a landlord, I do feel a duty to do whatever I can to help this tenant. So he's requested 3 months rent freeze, or half his rent, I should say, for 3 months. I did secure his understanding that it's a holiday and that the debt isn't a gift, that actually his rent would be suspended for 3 months and then would become due. And he was comfortable and happy with that. So the question really is, what does the panel think are my options, firstly, and then secondly, how to tie it up in terms of the legality of it, the paperwork behind it. How do I try to secure that agreement so that it's, as far as reasonable, watertight?
So Andy, he is offered, he wants to pay 50% and defer the other 50% for 3 months.
Yes.
Great. Okay. Panel, who would like to offer how they're dealing with that? Someone jump in.
So what I've been saying to people is that I'm happy, but you know, it's obviously uncertain times for the landlord as well. I think people, tenants are seeing that landlords, they're seeing about payment holidays and things like that as far as mortgages are concerned. And they're thinking, hold on, yeah, well, if he's getting a payment holiday, then, you know, maybe we could get a payment holiday. And I'm really interested in the end of this month, but I'm really interested in the end of next month as well. What I've been saying to people, some people have just up sticks and gone. I had a chef leave today to go and live with his girlfriend that he found a couple of months ago, and they've decided early to make it. I'm sorry, I really enjoyed living here, but I'm off, kind of thing. What's the T's and C's? And I said, look, I'm happy with a month's notice. And what I'll do is, he just couldn't afford to pay anything. He's had no work. He's got no prospect of work, so he's off. And we gentleman's agreement, I said, look, I'll just tell you what your arrears are when you've gone and worked out to the day from a month's time, and you can just start paying that back in 3 months. For people that have decided to stay that can't pay, or just basically can't leave because they've got nowhere to go, what I've told them is that I'll roll it up, and I'll roll it up for as long as it's needed, until we can sort of see the horizon, wait for the mist to clear, wait for the dust to settle, and then see where we're at. And I'm hoping that in 3 months' time it will be a much better place. I think the government have put in fantastic things in place in order to make people at least feel secure. I wrote a letter to, a long WhatsApp to all of my tenants saying that we had their back, and but also I've got staff to pay. We would look at everyone's cases individually. We're here to help, we're here to chat. And that received a great response. And out of 130 tenancies, I only had 5 people that said, I really think I'm going to struggle paying. Now that's gone up by about 1 a day for the last 3 or 4 days. So what I've basically said to people is that they can roll the rent up. Now, I actually feel that, again, in every adversity lies the seed of a greater benefit. To have these good, morally centred working people owing you maybe £1,000 or, you know, down by you guys, maybe 1,500 quid, 1,800 quid in 3 months' time. That's actually quite a good covenant, or it's the best covenant you're going to get nowadays. It's better than just saying to people, look, have a rent-free period, because you don't know how much, you know, you've got coming in. You don't know. I think these mortgage holidays that the mortgage companies are offering, I inquired about them, and I've been asked for my tax statements, you know, tax certificates, income details, all that kind of stuff. In other words, the mortgage companies are saying, well, can you afford it? Can you afford to pay for it out of your pocket for a while before they'll qualify me for a payment holiday? So I've left that for now, and that's in a holding pattern. But I feel that if you've got, you know, out of 80 rooms rented, I get the feeling I'll probably have about, at least, if this lasts 3 months the way that it's going with the lockdown, maybe half of those people, perhaps more, owing me quite a bit of money. That's not such a bad covenant for keeping it going in the future, because then they're tied to me a little bit more. And some of these people have got guarantors as well. So the fact that I deal with professional people, then I feel that that's a fairly good covenant going forward. And, you know, I think this is going to take quite a long time to sort itself out. What do the other big HMO landlords or other HMO landlords, how are they finding it? And what are they offering to tenants?
Hi, everyone here. It's Karen here. I'm not a HMO landlord, so I can't answer that specific question. But I think what I'd like to say, I think probably picks up on the sort of what people have been saying already, and that is that the key to this has got to be communication, particularly in current circumstances. Now more than ever, I think it is really important to reach out to tenants and to have a, you know, calm, reasonable conversation wherever you can around how they are, first and foremost. So obviously the sort of, you know, checking in on how they are health and welfare wise, but then of course having the conversation around you know, what they can afford to keep doing. And I think it's already been said, but getting across that key point that this is not an opportunity not to pay rent. You know, obviously they are legally contracted to continue paying rent to you as a landlord, but it's about being a human being and sort of, you know, trying to come up with something that feels like a sensible solution for all parties. I think that's really key. The only thing I'd add from a sort of National Landlords Association point of view is that I know that there are colleagues who are currently drawing up some templates which may or may not help some people in terms of the sorts of letters that you may well want to be sending to your tenants at whatever stage. So I'd sort of flag, keep having a look at the NLA website on a daily basis, because we continually update the sort of various templates and tools that we're going to put up there to try and help landlords. So that's really what I'd say at the moment is communication is key.
I think something I'll just jump in as well, since we operate a reasonable size portfolio of HMOs. I totally agree with what Karen just said about the lines of communication and trying to do that as effectively as possible with the tenants. I mean, for us, we have a letting agent. So a lot of communication goes through them. We also actually run some WhatsApp groups with the tenants. Our virtual assistant actually runs those WhatsApp groups so that we can get feedback to and from the tenants. Obviously, with your situation with the self-employed person, I know that the government are going to be announcing new guidelines for self-employed people. Obviously, at the moment, if you are on PAYE, you can claim up to 80%, or your company can claim up to 80% of your wages, so you can still be paid. I don't know whether this chap could claim 80% of his wages if they are going to roll out something like that for self-employed people. So it might be worth waiting a couple of days to see what the situation is with the self-employed guidelines. Something else that we have been doing or been thinking about doing is looking at areas where large amounts of employment are starting to happen near that particular HMO. So, the supermarkets are going to be employing people left, right and centre.
I looked at the paper map, thought, wrong, and I thought, rather, John, so I selected your email, and then I entered £100. You press it, type it all in, bosh, I get 100.
Sorry, I don't know what happened there. I've just turned everybody off. Rob H, I'm just going to turn you back on, okay? So go ahead. Sorry about that.
Yeah, so just another idea really is, in your area, there are going to be supermarkets that are going to be creating a big drive for new work for warehouses, those kinds of places. If you can find some employment hubs, do a bit of research and find out how they're employing people. I mean, we've been seeing that you can just walk into a supermarket now, as long as you've got ID, you can potentially apply for a job. So, with that line of communication, offering that tenant some other options, you maybe have done a bit of research on how they could potentially go and pick up a job over this 3-month period, which you might need just to keep him going until his normal role or normal job can start get going again.
Andy, can I just add, I think some of this is just from a purely, yes, we want to be human beings, but from a business perspective, you need to look at this in terms of risk management and be quite methodical in your approach to that. So look at each scenario and risk manage each scenario, because I'd be interested to hear what Richard Liddle thinks in the long term, but my experience of previous sort of downturns and difficulties for small businesses, that even if this only lasts 3 months, the recovery will be a lot longer. So 3 months payment at half his rent, 1, may not be long enough, and 2, it may be quite some time before he's able to pay back that other half. And I think all of those things are things that you need to think through. And anybody in this situation, just think through the different scenarios and map those out, model out the different scenarios, so that you're making a heart decision based on being a good human being and balancing that with your head decision of what your business needs. And of course, some of the risk that you're managing is reputational damage. If you say no and you evict him, that has to be part of the data that you look at in terms of the risk management. But you're making a decision sort of, should I do it or not? And I think the only way to know that from a financial perspective is to model it out properly and think through scenarios. Getting half, you know, it feels like better than getting none, and also reputationally feels like the right thing to do. But it's about modelling it out for yourself. Richard, I'd really be interested to see what you think.
I'll just quickly jump in. So thanks, Karen, on that one. I mean, with regards to to market crashes, you've got to look at the time periods involved. So I mean, let's look at, you know, the first and the second order effect that I would look at this. Actually, we're looking at this from a very much a landlord's perspective, as property investors, our own pockets. But now let's look at it from that tenant point of view. Is yes, we may well be able to offer them something, payment holidays, for a short period of time. However, if they have subsequently, you know, what the government has put in place here for them, where they're paying 80% or up to £2,500, etc., is a 12-month spin. It doesn't say that the damage that has been done to their industry is not far longer. Generally, on a crash, a recovery takes 10 years. Okay, so that's the time. That is a on a full crash, it's a 10-year recovery, or 7 with then a little bit in the middle. What Karen said there is a point which I believe very heavily on, is the fact that, again, let's look at what's been said. So with regards to evictions, you know, that individual has been caught up in something that's way beyond his control. It's not, he did not maliciously not pay his rent, so he's not a bad tenant. He's potentially just been caught up in situations. Some, I'm quite sure, will try and play the game of, oh, I now want a payment holiday because I know you're going to get a holiday. That's for you to manage as landlords. But what I'm getting at there is, firstly, you can't evict right now. Okay, so again, one of the measures that the government have put in place is we can't do that. So you can't go down the eviction avenue. Secondly, for me, is I would much rather be receiving 50% of the rent than nothing. Now, if you go down the hard stance of, no, you must pay me, the next thing that will happen is you will be getting nothing. But if you are in a pragmatic negotiation now and saying, look, I understand your situation, I'd like to now negotiate and we'll go to 50% rent, or let's not go all the way to 50% straight away, let's go to 70%. Okay, you don't need to go in 50% chunks, let's go to 70%. I would rather have 70% rent of him. He then will be far more willing to pay that because he understands that a negotiation has taken place. Something else as well, which is what I did with all of my HMOs last year, back end of last year, is I put them all onto long leases with either the majority are now supported living organisations. And I encourage you all to look into those type of organisations, because, you know, I'll give an example of one of mine, which was market rate. I was getting £120 per week for that unit, but with a supported living organisation, I'm receiving £100 per week. However, they've picked up all of the bills. There's no management charge, and there's obviously 0 vacancies in that. So it's a much smoother and slicker model in these times of uncertainty. They are all still looking for properties. There's huge tiers of supported living, everywhere from what's called the Move On Fund. Okay, Move On Fund, again, it goes beyond the scope of this webinar this evening. The Move On Fund, you can also get huge funding from Homes England if you are providing that level of accommodation. That level of accommodation is people who are moving, so they're moving out of hostels, ex-homeless hostels, but they are deemed to be in a sufficient and fit place to hold their own tenancies. There's massive funding available for that. Don't tar everybody with the same brush of homelessness. Some people are genuinely homeless through no fault of their own. However, on an FRI lease, you are actually devout of all responsibility for the building. There's also learning difficulty HMOs. We've now got one for adult learning difficulties. Again, an FRI lease for that, paying, you know, pretty much market rates, but it secures you through these rocky times. So if you are looking at that, potentially look into it in your area, look at the organisations that offer this. If you have let's call it a 5-bed HMO, which has already got 2 vacancies in it, potentially look when that HMO becomes fully vacant to move it on to that system. It enables you to ride out all of the rough times. It's something I moved every one of my HMOs onto the back of last year. So now I'm just riding FRI leases for the next 2 years. It's the risk mitigation in there.
Great.
I
hope that offers something.
Yeah, I'd agree with everything everybody said so far. I think 3 other things. One is don't panic. If you look at where we were a week ago, we didn't have 330 billion kicking around. We didn't have support for self-employed people. We didn't have 80% of salaries and all that kind of stuff. So stuff has come out in the last 7 days, and more stuff is going to come out in the next 7 days. You know, they're not making it up as they go along, but they're just putting things out in a process as they get themselves sorted out and get stuff happening. So, you know, he might have another income streams that he can pull on to help him keep up his payments. So I agree with Karen, understand the risks, think about what your options are, but maybe not jump into a solution today, because next week there might be something slightly different. You know, this is going to be a long drawn out process. It's not going to be all over at the end of next week, so we don't have to jump in and decide on solutions today. The other one is just going back to what Rich was saying. We've been talking to both of our local councils about providing emergency housing. Because of where we are, normally people would move through the housing cycle, so they go into emergency accommodation, whether that's a B&B or a hotel, then they'd find them somewhere else, then eventually they move out at the other end. At the moment, nobody's moving out the other end, so they are desperate for emergency accommodation. You talk about £100–150 a week, Rich. 2-bed house, £55 a night, bills included. So that's £350 a week for a house. For a 2-bed house, up to I think it's £80 a night for a 4-bed house. So they have money. They've got fixed rates that they've agreed with all their providers. They have stuff. So get in touch with the housing teams in your local councils. Ask for the emergency housing team, the temporary housing team. Offer up your properties if they're vacant, or say, look, I think I'm going to have some vacant properties. Get me on your list. So there's lots of opportunities out there. You've just got to be a bit creative and think outside the box. But I think my one thing would be is don't panic. Think about the risks. Think about your contingency plans. Think about your cash flow. Cash for supporting your business shouldn't be your cash. You know, there are other funding streams out there, whether it's the government grants and stuff like that. You're using your own cash should be a last resort. So yeah, that's kind of my three bits on that one.
Great. Thank you, John. Thank you, Rich. Really, really insightful. Just while that conversation has been going on, if you take a look at the chat, several people have been recommending some really interesting resources. So Sarah's been talking about Wendy Whitaker Large having some really useful resources available in her Ultimate HMO Success group. And Karen has been posting a lot of useful NLA links as well. They're well worth checking out. Over the last few days and a week or so, I've seen a lot of really, really good, well-written, insightful letters that landlords have been pumping out to their tenants. And I think someone else mentioned something along these lines. David mentioned this before about having a wait and see approach. Well, I think if that's a proactive decision to have a wait and see approach, then you know, kind of each to their own. That's up to you. There is a line to be drawn between being too proactive and offering up the opportunity for a small number of people to perhaps take advantage. So as Paul and Rich said before, I think the reality is most people aren't like that, and most people won't make a move to try and take advantage of the situation. They will genuinely act as they could, and by being a good investor or landlord or landlady, then offering them the opportunity of helping to identify resources, of ways they can help themselves and where they can go to, is well worth doing. Before we move on to let others have the opportunity, does anyone have any final comments for Andy on that?
Could I just add a small piece? Firstly, what John was saying is absolutely crucial, that as much as this time it's really easy to panic, and actually part of that is we all want to try and do something to help. There's a lot of, in all different roles, in business, in political life, public life, specifically in the NHS as well. There's a lot of adaptive leadership going on right now, which really means is we're making judgments without knowing all the information that we've got, based on what we think is right. And if we hone that down to where where you are, there's going to be some decisions that you may have to make. You take into account the risk, and you take into account how you feel, and you take into account who you're working with, and make some judgments. The support that we need from government will get greater as we all understand what we're doing. But as Jon knows from his work with local councils right now, is there's a lot of, the local government is reacting to national government's requests, and then trying to articulate that out to the rest of the world. So there is a bit of a time lag between what's being said nationally, then understood locally in local areas, and then of course local areas are in different nations of Northern Ireland, Scotland, Wales as well, depending on where you operate. So there is a time lag between Boris standing up and saying A and the local council or local area that you're in delivering B. And that is frustrating for everybody. But what I can say to you from my experience, and I had a briefing yesterday on what this means in Southampton specifically, is we're on it. We're just waiting for the directions of what that looks like to then be able to say to people like Jon or you, Andy, or you, Rob, this is what it looks like to you locally.
Great. Thanks, Dan. Andy, as has been said to you, it is changing daily. There may be support for self-employed people coming soon. And the only thing I'd add before we move on, adding on to what Karen said, knowing your scenario and your specific situation, only you can do that, understanding where, like, what is your break-even point, what works for you, what makes sense for you, is crucial to understand as you go into this discussion. Having 50% or 70% versus 0% may well be better than nothing, but also knowing where your break-even point is and where it is sustainable for you or not is very, very useful. I'm going to move on and open the call up to some other any other questions.
Hi Rob, it's Mark Porter. Got a question for the group, if that's all right. Essentially, I'm a new landlord, and I think listening to your introduction on that video a little while ago, this meeting is designed for new starters, if you like. So I have 2 buy-to-lets, and I'm looking to grow the portfolio. I want to follow a nothing left in strategy. And my brother-in-law, incidentally, is on the call as well, because we're looking to potentially go in together on our next property. Our problem is it's really bloody hard to find a property at the right price below market value. I've been looking at a few, none have really worked out. So really it's just a call for help, a call for advice really on what am I doing wrong and what are your top tips? Open to everyone else.
Rob, I'm happy to jump in here. It's Tim. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can.
Yes.
Thanks.
Yeah, I'm a pretty tenacious guy, and I get the bit of my team, I go at it. And what you've just said is absolutely true. The absolute gems are very, very hard to find. It took me 2 years to find this latest one that I'm doing, but it is an absolute beauty. It is absolutely just, I get so excited every time I walk through the door of the place. They are there, but they're very hard to find. I spoke to, there's this particular one's in Hove in East Sussex on the seafront looking out to sea. I mean, I could go on about it and you won't shut me up because it's just so good. But the only way I found it is by speaking to every single agent in Brighton and Hove, to the point where they said, "This, what you want doesn't exist. You can't get this thing." Anyway, it did. And every tradesman that comes in and says, "How did you get this? This is absolutely amazing." I got it because I spoke to absolutely everybody. So you're right. It's hard. It's really hard to find the below market deals, especially now. However, I think there'll be some great deals and great opportunities coming along in the next 6 to 12 months. So don't stop. Absolutely don't stop. Keep flooding the market. Speak to your agents. Get to know them. Go in and see the agents. Just say you're walking past and you saw the door, you saw them in. Actually, they're not going to be there at the moment, are they? Of course. But find a way to speak to these people is the best advice I can give. But don't give up. Absolutely don't give up.
Great advice.
Somebody else.
Thanks, Tim.
Yeah, I'd say wait a few weeks and see what happens. How much time have you actually got in order to put into the purposing of these properties, Mark?
Well, I do work, so I've got a job, part-time, 4 days a week, and I've got a young family. So, and plus I'm homeschooling at the moment as well. So, time is short. But I guess if I get a better idea of what I'm doing, I'll make the time, because you've got to do that, haven't you?
It's one of those, isn't it? Inch by inch, life change. A guy rang me last night who is a tradesman. He's on the tools. I mean, I spent a long time on the tools and learning how to do it literally from scratch. And the more time and the more effort and the more work you can do yourself, obviously, while you're growing a portfolio, the better margins you can make and the more horrible properties you can buy. The problem is getting the financing on the horrible properties. And with finance being a problem now, I'd suggest you maybe do a JV with an investor who has, well, wouldn't we all love to, a JV with an investor who has money to spend but not so much time putting in. So if you can put in the experience and the time, perhaps someone else can put in the money. I mean, are you quite fluid yourself? Are you, have you got liquid assets that you can put in for decent sized deposits? Because we're going to see LTVs maybe dropping at least over the next few months, so it's going to be it's great that you're sort of sat here saying, right, the rest of the world's, very, very uncertain and in a state of flux, and you're like that. I want to get my teeth into this job. So fair play to you for that. But are you able to put a decent sized deposit down? Maybe, what's your average doer-upper in your area? 2-bed terrace or 3-bed terrace? And would you consider going HMO?
Oh yeah, I'd love to go HMO. I've got a chunk of money that doesn't limit me to the opportunities that are out there, but with my brother-in-law, that increases the opportunity with the amount that he's got to put in. Yeah. And again, if we find the right opportunity, I'm sure I can dig up some close investors in the family. So there's opportunity there. It's just finding the right property first. So I suppose one of the things is, do you look local? So, we live in Southampton. There are some quite affluent areas in Southampton, but or do you look further away, like Hove?
No, don't look in Hove.
Get yourself to Rob's property meet. Oh, well, actually, no, you can't anymore.
I personally say invest in your doorstep. Yeah. I invest in Southampton, find deals of properties in Southampton. And one of the things that I did many times over is put leaflet through people's doors. And one lady actually called me back yesterday and come back to me today, and she said, "Oh, I think my house is worth £117,000. I've done my digging. I may have heard it wrong, but they say it's worth 170. So it could just be that she heard it wrong or whatever else. But there are going to be deals out there, and there's also, it's like recently I bought a 1-bedroom house which turned into a 2-bedroom house. We paid £92,000 for that in Southampton, and done up, which would be, if everything was fantastic, then it would be worth about 150,000. So there's deals in Southampton. You've just got to keep your eyes peeled.
Well, I've had conversations with a few people very recently about real life deals that are happening. Now is a really odd time. If you're still looking to buy no money left in, as we were discussing before, kind of hold style properties, there's really no rush. Property is a long, slow game. There's a lot of turmoil happening at the moment. As people have mentioned before, loan to values are likely to be all over the place. Prices are likely to be in flux. If you're looking for something that's going to return you some of your funds and be a good cash flowing asset for a period of time, then whether you buy today or tomorrow or in a number of months' time, when you understand the landscape a bit better, probably in the grand scheme of things doesn't necessarily make much difference. You're in a brilliant position that you're keen, you're hungry, you're active, and I kind of know already how, I know how tenacious you are, how hardworking you are. Lots of people, I think, we find lots of people take, they want to get on and get going quickly. And I know you've been working at this for a while, but these really are unprecedented times. It often takes a good few months, portions of a year, to get established, to understand just exactly the right thing, the right relationships, the right locations. I think you've heard me talk before about, for me, local is great. I think local is important. I've had some experience of both, and I really like local. Local can mean lots of things to lots of people. And there's a number of people here today who are very successful at investing remotely, but it is a different kettle of fish. Work out what it is you want to do, and if kind of find your niche and stick to your guns and go for it, and keep working hard at it. Just maybe hold off for a little bit whilst we're in this most crazy world right now. Paul, were you going to add something?
Yeah, I was going to say, keep your eyes and ears open. I mean, I keep my eyes on projects that other people are doing when you're driving past and see if there's been much activity there. I mean, I'm not saying prey on the weak, but there might be people wanting to get out of this, projects that might stall and fail. Keep your eyes open and speak to as many people as possible. Even builders' yards, and purchase lease options might be something. You might find other landlords that are getting a bit sick of their lives. I've found a few landlords lately who are just, they're happy to sell something on a structured basis over the say a 10-unit portfolio over the next 10 years. I'm dealing with a guy at the moment that's looking at doing that. He doesn't want to sell everything straight away, but he's happy for me to put them all on a PLO and buy them at 1 or 2 a year over the next 9 years, as that suits him. So creative deals as well. Have you thought of maybe commercial buildings that you can get through prior approval or permitted development? You can get, prior approval for turning certain classes of commercial building into flats. One flats, you need to ask Rob King about all that. But that's what I'm on with at the moment. I'm looking at converting some big commercial buildings into co-living, and I think co-living is fairly safe. But don't do SA just at the moment, no. Can we get on to SA in a minute, actually? I wanted to ask some of the other SA landlords about their creative stuff, how they've been repurposing that stuff.
I just want to quickly add to back up what Paul said there is, now is the time to really get to grips with creative strategies, understand what a lease option is, understand what an EDC is, understand how that they can benefit you and benefit. When I was doing, I did a lot of lease options. I still do options now. As I say, I took on 4. The last ones I took on was a portfolio of 4 HMO Liverpool. Brilliant properties. The individual remote investor just didn't want them anymore. Took them all, senior options on all of them. Fantastic properties. So they're still out there. But what the world that we're about to enter into will be, if you know how to negotiate an option, will be flooded with them. Where they are absolutely fantastic, and where I did them a lot was back in kind of the negative equity days. Okay, that's when you lease options into their own. 90% of an option is knowing how to explain and negotiate that option. If you can't explain an option to a 6-year-old child, then I question whether you know the ins and outs of an option. And a lot of that is just about rehearsal, learning what you want to say, learning the objections that may well come back to you. Now is the time to start studying that strategy. And it's not a strategy, it's simply a tool in a toolbox that you can deploy to a property. That can turn a property that isn't 25% below market value into a property that is, i.e. you could take control of that now, okay, or at the bottom of this market. Nobody knows where the bottom is going to be, and never try and predict the bottom. Okay, nobody likes a bottom picker. But you can basically offer on an option will have a 5 to 7 year term on it, where you can pretty much forecast that the market will be a completely different place to what it is now. You're solving the vendor's problem now because they may be in desperation. You're getting a property that actually will be worth a lot more when you come to subsequently have to exercise that option. Learn about them now. If anybody wants to know anything about that, please do reach out to me on social media. I do quite a lot of lives on that in our community, and I'm happy to do that more. The fact that we're all in isolation, so I'm happy to go over that and do some lives, do some education pieces on that. But use this time now. Don't wait until the time that you want in an option to then go back and learn how to deliver it and learn how to negotiate it. Learn now. That was my little rant. Sorry.
Thank you, Rich. Awesome. Thank you, guys. Mark, I'm going to move on from your question now, just to give others an opportunity. On the chat, Tina has asked a question. I'll reiterate it now and put it to the panel. Tina, if you'd like to add anything after I've done that, please feel free. So Tina and Richard are a husband and wife couple investing locally in Southampton. Her question, she said, we have young professional HMOs. Can we still put new tenants into those houses? We have someone moving into a house on Friday. Would anyone like to answer this question?
Yeah, I had a conversation with my letting agent today about that. Obviously, with all the restrictions on movement, that was a question I had. We've got empty rooms in some of our properties. They, at the moment, are saying they are working as normal because it's an essential thing for people to be able to move home. I think where it's going to be a challenge, obviously, is having the staff to be able to go and do check-ins and things like that. So I've seen on Facebook groups, particularly, a lot of people talking about, like more virtual style check-ins, signing contracts using things like HelloSign rather than doing it physically. So I think it's probably more a case of having to adapt over this period, particularly the next 3 months, rather than necessarily saying, no tenants can move in, I would have thought.
Yeah, just to add to that, just to add to that, can you hear me there?
Yes.
All right, smashing. Just to add to that, I'll be moving people in if they want to be in. I mean, part of that is obviously medical staff that are needing self-isolate from the families. I've actually had 2 inquiries, which I'm yet to find out why, but there's a caravan site where some caravan sites have people living on all year round, and those kind of holiday park caravan sites. There seems to be one of those shut down by me. I've had 2 inquiries, and another inquiry which is a bit ambiguous that I think has just come through, might be from the same caravan park. So it looks like, if you've got one of those around you, I'm told that that's been shut down for the reasons of the lockdown, and all of those people in there, for some strange reason unbeknownst to me, have been asked to move out of that caravan park. So that might, that kind of thing. I've got plenty of people come into my HMOs and SAs. I've just actually done my essays on tenancies at will for the next few weeks to see how this thing pans out. But I've got a couple of brothers where their father has got cancer, and they're having to self-isolate away from him. So people that are moving away from vulnerable members of the family. So, and I'll be moving those people in until someone pulls me up and says, stop me. And it's like my tradesmen have gone to work this week. I've sent them into 3 different properties, 3 guys into 3 different properties to say, well, until someone stops you, they're isolated from the moment they leave the door. They're not in contact with anyone until they go to work and come back again. They take a packed lunch with them. And so until, a policeman stops us and says, you can't do that, I think that's safer than actually staying at home with everyone. Mind you, they may be coming into contact with other surfaces that other people have touched who have been, but these projects that I'm sending them out to have been empty for, a couple of months. So, I mean, if anyone disagrees with that, fair enough. I've gone a little bit off topic there with the tradesmen, but with the back to the essays quickly, I haven't had much joy out of the hospital. I have had more joy out of more creative strategies. I've taken 2 girls out of one HMO that they just didn't want to be in there anymore, and they've gone into another essay of mine. So I'd be interested in hearing about other essay strategies that anyone else has got. I mean, the gentleman with 26 essay, I mean, what are you doing to get more business from where?
John, you still with us? That was John.
Yeah, so what we are trying to work with hospitals, and we've got there are 6 hospitals around us, so there's quite an opportunity. They are, just for everyone's benefit, they have a national contract. So NHS England has a national contract with a corporate provider to sort that out. But on the side of that, we've had doctors and nurses coming to us looking for accommodation, either because they don't want to wait for their national provider, We did have somebody who'd been put in a hotel that had no hot water. Not entirely sure how they managed to get away with that, but speaking to the local councils, as somebody else said earlier about the big distribution hubs. So there's a big Liddle warehouse near us. There's a big Amazon depot near us. They are busy recruiting as fast as they can. I do know other people who have had success with the supermarkets. So where those supermarkets are recruiting, not always local. A lot of our contractors, we've got a lot of contractors in. They reckon that their jobs are going to come to an end at the end of this week, but they're going to partly because they can't get home because they're not from the UK, or there's no flights home. We've had conversations with all sorts of people and all sorts of people who were trying to emigrate to Italy, now can't. In their house, and they were supposed to move into a new Barratt house. Barratt has said the house isn't going to be ready for another 4 to 6 weeks, so they're looking for somewhere to stay. It's a real mixed bag of people. We housed someone yesterday he flew in from Australia yesterday. We just put him in a really nice place actually. He's starting a job with Cunard. Cruise industry is not exactly booming at the moment, but he's transferring to their UK office. So it's a real mixed bag. I think that it's just putting your name out there, saying that we're here, we exist. We've been putting it on buy and sell Facebook groups all over the place, just putting our names out there, just trying to get people to sort of recognise the accommodation company name and call us up. If we can't help or it's not in our area, we know people, and I'm sure you do, Paul, across the country, and Rob, who've got other SAs that we're happily putting people in touch with. I think at the moment it's a case of let's just help everybody else out. We're not taking commissions on stuff that we pass on to other people. We're just trying to work together. So both in Southampton and Portsmouth, we've worked with everybody else around, and we've got a list of probably 100 properties in each location. So we're going to the big corporate providers and saying, look, and to the hospital, got 100 properties in your area that we can help you with. It's much harder if you go in and say, well, I've got a couple of flats, can we help you out? If we go in and say we've got 100 properties, they're more likely to pay attention. So I would say, buddy up with those around you, work together. We've just put a spreadsheet together, and we're just sending that spreadsheet to those big organisations, saying, look, these places are available. I'm your single point of contact. Just come through me, and we'll make it happen. Our view, so the NHS is doing a lot of planning this week, with a big kick-off next week in terms of what they're going to do and how they're going to deliver. So my wife is one of the ops managers for one of the hospitals down here, so she's working all hours under the sun trying to put plans in place and do things and get things set up. So I think the NHS side is going to ramp up massively. Anybody who's got anywhere near Excel in London, you get a massive opportunity. There's 4,000 people going to be working in Excel next week. You have a massive opportunity. You'll have the army there from tomorrow. That'll be set up and running by Monday. I'm not sure where they're going to sleep, but whether they take over the hotels. But actually, there's going to be nursing staff, there's going to be doctors, there's going to be all sorts of people. Get your name out there. Find the groups that are working that build, and go and chase those things. So, and that won't be the only one. I think there'll be other ones popping up as well. It's near some of the other major towns and cities. A lot of the big hotels are closing because they can't staff them. Although they're offering up to the NHS, putting 50 to 100 people in a hotel which has got an air conditioning system doesn't really work for me. And those are the lot, and that's the same for the medical staff as well. They're not particularly happy about that either. So I think get your name out there, think creatively, just put the message out there that you exist. You've got places available. Using the words isolation and isocation and stuff like that seems to be getting people's backs up. So try and stay away from those words. But just offer the fact that you've got places to stay. at reasonable rates, discounts available. You know, stay over 14 days, get a 40% discount, because those are the people you want. The people that are going to be there for sort of more than 14 days because they know they've got to isolate. Just don't say isolate. Yeah, those are the kind of things that we're doing.
I had a huge amount of success with Gumtree, just to put that out there.
Yeah, we've got an ad on Gumtree, 2 ads on Gumtree, yeah.
To the point now where I've got people keep asking if I've still got places available, and well, I haven't, but so they're all going to a local letting agent who's just rubbing his hands together, obviously, but Gumtree is very successful.
Paul, and perhaps more for the benefit of everyone else, but as much for you, if for those who are looking at rent to SA isn't my bag, but I know a few people who are run their entire business very successfully off SA, and a lot of that is rent to SA. They are ruthlessly analysing their current situation to death, income, looking at all the avenues of income, though in reality a lot of that has just tanked, in some cases dropped off to zero, and in particular where the expenses are, and just understanding what that is, and sort of taking a pragmatic business approach, and in some cases being really ruthless about rent to SA contracts that they're in, that they've signed up to, that they have long commitments to, and it's not necessarily a particularly good or strong or moral move, but in some cases, if you're in a contract with a long notice period and that notice period is going to sink you by having outgoings where there is nothing coming in, then I know a few people who are now considering having kind of grown-up conversations with their landlords about just exactly what to do, in the same way that tenants are having them with us. And I know of 1 or 2 cases where that's happened, and in fact the landlord was expecting that conversation to come, and it wasn't necessarily particularly pleasant for either side, but actually probably was something that everybody was expecting. And in lots of those cases, it seems that maybe the outcome isn't necessarily as bad as the idea might be of the elephant in the room. So that's particularly key SA side.
I think the key in that is early communication, isn't it? Exactly what you said, early communication. While everyone's still got a bit of a siege mentality going on, and everyone's kind of clubbing together, you know, before people have been cooped up 3 weeks with the families, it's now a great time to get in. Just get in early, because it's about the communication, isn't it? That's what and as landlords, by putting our messages out to our tenants, we'd rather not have someone just not paying. We'd absolutely much rather, and there's a lot of respect going back and forward as well at the moment, with the fact that we're all in this together. You know, nobody's blaming anything else, it's the virus. I mean, last crash it was the banks, and everyone got very cantankerous and, you know, scrappy with banks, and then banks were trying to pull people's mortgages on crazy covenants that they weren't bothered about when the interest rates were 5.5%, whatever. Now it's definitely, we feel like we're all in the trenches together, and there's definitely a lot better feeling, if you like. That's there's a much more sort of teamwork to make the dream work thing at the moment. So get in early, snooze you lose.
Guys, we've been going for an hour and a half now. I've tried to stay on top of the chat, which at times has been going pretty fast, to catch any questions that were flying through. If anyone has any extras, please shout. Chris.
Yeah, Rob, can you hear me?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, Rob. So I'm based in Madrid in Spain, and my day by day is living with the coronavirus, which you guys don't see yet, but it's going to come your way, and it's going to be quite impactful. So I'll talk a little bit about my life with my family with the coronavirus. I've got 3 young children. We've been inside our house now for the past 2 weeks. I've got some property in London. And it's tough because you can't go out, and if you do go out, you're scared. The coronavirus, which I think a lot of people don't understand, is highly contagious. And the deadly aspect of it is that you don't realize that you're highly contagious until you get symptoms. Now, we've all heard that you don't get these symptoms potentially up until 15 days. During those 15 days, you can infect a high number of people that you come into contact with. So I won't go into the numbers about being on the London Underground, being squashed on buses, globalization, planes landing in Heathrow every 3 minutes from all over the world. But I think the UK has got a bit of awakening coming their way, because so far everyone seems to think that it's a European problem and no one travels to the UK, they only travel to Italy and Spain. But that's not the case at all. A couple of facts: doctors have said that they're not testing, and therefore you don't really know the full scale of what's happening on your doorstep. 20% is considered to be serious, 80% is mild. Those are self-isolating cases. So you really don't know what you're dealing with, apart from the fact that this is a highly contagious disease. Our lives have been suspended. I'm fortunate enough that I'm a contractor. I work for a bank. I've got a contract until the end of 3 months, and after that, don't know. But this is highly contagious. People are scared to go out of their houses. When you do go out, then the police make sure that you go to wherever you need to go with a purpose. So I'll give you a scenario. I was out the other day and I was dropping off 4 bags of rubbish. There's a little machine there where you can do arm dips. I wanted to do a bit of exercise. And in the 5 minutes that I just did a couple of sets of arm dips and throw the rubbish in, the police rolled up and asked me what I was doing. I said to them I was just throwing away the rubbish and doing a bit of exercise. They said, no, you can't do that. Next time you do that, it'll be 1,500 euros to pay. This is extremely highly contagious. Speak to anyone who's Italian, speak to anyone who's Spanish, and they will tell you how diabolical this disease is. Life does not continue on as it does as you think now. So I've heard some great stuff about some of the people talking, saying, you've got to set expectations. You've got to put models in place. Yes, set your expectations, because your life is about to change drastically over the coming months. You can't expect people to pay indefinitely, and I won't go into that. I shouldn't touch that. But my life here is, when I go out to the shops now, I'm wearing disposable gloves. I keep the shoes that I wear outside. I keep my coat that I wear outside. As soon as I go to the shops and I come back, some people wear face masks. I don't, because I'd rather be self-aware of the fact that there's germs out there. There's a lot of people that wear face masks. As soon as I come back from the grocery store, I take off the gloves, put them in the rubbish, take my clothes off, take my shoes off, everything goes in the washing machine, and I go to the shower and I have a shower. My hair, glasses, everything. This is about as contagious as it can possibly be. So I heard that HMOs, houses of multiple occupancy, yeah, of course. People want to know where the other person's going. It's a risk. It's a high risk. At least I know where my household's going every day. My children don't go outside apart from our own garden. And when they do, we got a roof that shelters from the people above us, just in case something falls over and they pick it up and they catch something. This is about as bad as it's going to get. But I don't think the government has done enough to make people realize it. Our freedom of movement has been severely restricted. I go in my own car, but people can't. They have to walk. London's a very busy place. Big city's a big, busy place. This situation is serious. It's not going to get any better. It's not going to get any better. Look at the World Health Organization reports every day and look at the statistical numbers going up. We're on, in Spain, we're on 25,000. No, 35. I heard from the guy who was the landlord here today, 35,000. Well, if that represents 20%, we're on close to 200,000 people being infected. but they're not taking it seriously. You have to take this seriously. This is a virus, and if you come into close contact with someone, you can easily get it. If you go to your parents, they can get it because you may not know that you have it. That's why Boris Johnson was saying at the last minute, don't go to see your parents. We don't go and see our family anymore. We've isolated them. We stay away from our parents. We stay away from our loved ones. We can only control the household that we're in at the moment. So if you talk about evicting people, where are they going to go during this crisis? They've got nowhere to go. So it is a kind of mission of humanity here that you need to be prepared for, because there's no other options. Who's going to take them in? If someone come to me and said, do you want to take in this perfect stranger, not knowing their history, not knowing if they got the virus or not, which they could have for the next 15 days. I don't know if I've got the virus, because every time I go out, I reset the clock and I've got to wait 15 days. This is a very serious situation here. I mean, credit models are going out the door because they're not realistic anymore. Banks have to lend money to businesses knowing that they may not get repaid because some of the essential services have to keep on running.
Thanks, Chris, and thank you for sharing personally. I think that it's really sobering for us all. It's possibly a vision into the future for us here in the UK, talking about.
Hopefully not. Hopefully not. Hopefully not.
Yeah, thank you, and thanks for sharing with such passion, Chris. It's always useful to hear. We've been going for an hour and 45 minutes. We've had an incredible number of people on the call. I'm just going to invite any one final question before I will close. We probably can do one more.
It's not a question so much, Rob. Good evening, everyone. I'm hearing a lot about distribution centres and people taking on staff at short notice. So I'm a facility manager at a 50,000 square metre distribution centre in Exeter for Liddle. We've just employed 50 to 60 Flybe staff. We are taking on agency staff left, right and centre. Unfortunately, the panic buying bubble has now burst from briefings we're having daily. We've had statistics back from Italy that Italy's take now is 30% lower than market value should be, which is quite worrying. The brief coming that any agency staff, as soon as our prod figures get to a certain point, will be let go. So with that in mind, there will be many people saying that they have work, but it is only extremely short term. Interestingly, I've had contractors cancelling left, right and centre for planned maintenance works. Only mandatory inspections and testing is to be carried out currently in emergency call-outs. It is worrying times, and I sort of listen to what Chris says, but I just got a quick question for Rich, as he posted something last night regarding the self-employment and something in relation to what Paul picked up on earlier. With the light of the self-employment payments coming, do you foresee that contractors will be told to fully self-isolate, and there'll be a release from the government in the next sort of 24, 48 hours? And off the back of that, with regards to Paul and perhaps planning works in properties for the next probably 6 to 9 months, if we do go into lockdown and contractors can't facilitate those works, where do we think we are with projects already running and that pushing figures further to the right and possibly upsetting budgeting plans? So Rich, the first question, I suppose, do you foresee a complete shutdown coming?
To be honest, Michael, I think it's kind of, I'm probably not, I think it's imminent. You know, I talk about what I call first and second order effects. So the first order effect would be potentially that we are told to shut down. The second order effect is exactly what you just said, that actually coming down that line there is actually the far greater pieces, you know. And I've mapped kind of my vision of when I look at first and second order effects for this whole thing. With regards to contractors there, to be honest, I'm probably not the best person to speak to about that. Do I think the UK government should have done it? Yes, I do. To a level, you know, it's things like building sites at the moment are still being worked on. And that's, but the government produced a document yesterday saying that building sites could still be worked on. Yes, I see their vision is the fact that, yes, you're working on a building site, you're out in the open space and you can maintain the 2 meters. But then there's pictures on social media of them all cramming into a single porta cabin canteen shed. So it kind of defeats that object. So that's the, yes, first order effect, yeah, we can continue because we're outdoors and 2 meters. But then second order, well, you're not abiding by that lunchtime. So it's a difficult job the government have. Okay, what Chris has just said there about where he is a sobering thought. I've looked at, you know, what's happened in China, how long it's taken the UK to potentially go on to lockdown. If I'm honest, I'm surprised it's taking so long. What will be next? I don't know. You still see pictures of the tube, which are in horrendous affairs. The points that were made there, banks lending to businesses, which ultimately the businesses may fail. So the banks are knowingly not going to get their money back or repaid. That is what I was talking about, where once the Dow, the US average drops below a certain point, once the FTSE drops below a certain point, we're not in the property market here, we're in the economic market. Once that drops below a certain point, there is no immediate recovery. Therefore, every other market around it will crash. But I guess to answer your question, it's an unprecedented time. The piece that was released yesterday with reference to self-employment, there needs to be a lot more meat on the bones for that. I think the reason that was held back, quite frankly, is because the Prime Minister and the Chancellor were dealing with the lowest hanging fruit first. It's very easy to deal with those people who are currently on benefits or universal credit. It's very easy to deal with those people who are currently in employment, therefore asking the employers to cover those salaries. It's far more difficult. And what they're more conscious of is actually the abuse that will come from that when it is released, okay? Because every one of these systems will be open to the scammers and the abuse. The proof is in the pudding. Okay, I've worked with Universal Credit for a long time, and it is an onerous system and procedure. Okay, Universal Credit and the LHA rate, again, yet another one of those things I could talk a long time about. Universal Credit had a huge impact on the rise of homelessness, because actually it was a very, very onerous piece to get their head around. This new thing with the government, where a lot of the benefits that they're offering, they're leaning on the universal credit system. The time it takes for that money to be released, by the time that money is released, the damage will have already happened. So yes, these pieces are being put in place by the Prime Minister and the Chancellor. The proof will be in the pudding of how they are administered. I do think contractors, to come back to your original point, should be somehow more managed, but I don't feel I'm the expert to answer that. I think there's, you know, I think there's some bigger, I think that there's a huge, we've got a long way to go into this, and I think things are going to get a lot worse.
Just to add our experience, so we currently we have 4 active live sites full of contractors. So no, the number that's jumping into my head is probably 20, but you know, between 15 and 30 contractors who are on sites actively, you know, possibly even 40 or so day to day. I don't quite understand why we have given the construction industry such a special case. I very much hear what Rich is saying about being surprised we haven't done more lockdown quicker. You know, to some extent we're benefiting from that because our construction sites are still ongoing. But possibly it's a really interesting question around the link between, well, yes, it's far more complicated to work out exactly how to do an equivalent 80% of your salary up to £2,500, an equivalent of that in the self-employed world, and many people in the construction industry on some version of a self-employed basis, or far more likely to be in that complicated scenario. But it does feel like it is quite short term. I mean, this morning we had a call where we canvassed all of the contractors and their suppliers, and there is a tightening already of some of the elements of that. Not not so much on the labour side, but possibly more it's the supply chain of the builders merchants is beginning to tighten, and that's probably an early indicator that it's going to get more challenging. I would think there are sites all over where contractors are taking the decision to shut down, or I've just seen Sarah's just said our contractors have ceased work. There are locations where that's stopping even before it's kind of formally mandated.
I mean, the thing that is unprecedented, you've got to think that at no point in history, okay, not even from the Second World War, at no point in history have we as a country or as a globe as been asked to stop working and isolate in our own homes. So if you are thinking, and this isn't to spread doom and gloom, but it's about the reality of it. And again, like Chris said, the reality, a lot of people are doing a lot to recover from this, and there are a lot of things that you can put in place to risk mitigate where you are. And hopefully, if we pop out the other end in, let's call it 12 weeks, we will not have that much damage done. But we're still pausing every single aspect of life for 12 weeks. Every industry, every manufacturing plant, every the supply and demand chain of everything from cars, from manufactured food, from all of that is pausing for 3 months. Okay. If you think that will not have a long lasting impact, then, you need to really start looking around. You will need to start taking the positives from this. Okay. And again, let's not, I'll do one quick bit, 2-minute bit. And it's something that I've said a lot about in my group is actually the damaging thing for people throughout this entire process will be the mental damage that is caused. You need to get your head in the right place. The thing that will damage everybody is waking up every single day, watching the news, watching those media channels, social media, and looking or thinking, when will this end? When will this end? If you wake up every single day thinking, has it ended today? Has it ended today? You will drive yourself mad. The mental damage will be phenomenal. This is going to be long enough that you need to find and you need to create a new norm. Okay, your normality in life is changing. You need to create a new norm. If you used to get up in the morning, exercise, breakfast, go to work, etc., you now need to create a new daily routine. Okay, without that daily routine, your mental health will suffer. Forget property for one moment. Everybody needs to keep their mental health in check. So create a new norm. Otherwise, you will drive yourself mad by getting up each day thinking, has this ended? And as long as your mental health, if your mental health is true and being able to be maintained, okay, which will get more and more difficult, if you can maintain that mental health, then actually when we do pop out the other end, and we will pop out the other end, you'll be in a fantastic position, at least mentally and physically, to go and capitalize on the opportunity that's there.
Just on a note of the
I think that's absolutely right there, Richard. I mean, I've created that very norm that you're talking about in order to get us through this particular period. So as I wrote on the chat there, I wear gloves if I go out. I stop food shopping now for at least 7 to 8, 10 days. I put it off where I may be doing it every day now. I put it off to once every 7 to 10 days now. I wear gloves when I go out. If I had a face mask and I could get hold of one, I'd wear it, and I explain what I do when I come home, and I do that routinely between 7 and 10 days. So you're absolutely right. I make it sound like it's doomsday. Yes, it can be for a lot of people who don't heed that advice. We are going through a form of Darwinism, as for those who do not adapt quickest to their environment do not survive. So you are right. It is about just putting protocols into place from a humanitarian perspective, making sure that you are safe, keeping safe distances, wear gloves, wear a mask if you can get hold of one. Don't crowd people's space all the time. Don't go around thinking that everyone's immune to it and no one's carrying it. People are carrying it and they don't know it. And that's the deadly aspect here. But as long as you follow the rules and you understand that, then you're right, Richard. It's absolutely key to create these norms and just to be mindful. If you're mindful, you'll get through it, no problem.
Great. Thank you very much, Chris. I realise we're coming up to 2 hours. I'm going to close this at 2 hours. Just before we do, Michael, you've been very quiet. Michael Primrose, you've been very quiet on the call the whole time. I'm sure respectful of others who are making points. I think we're all quite keen to hear your perspective. I know a number of people have written. Are you still with us?
Yes, I'm still here. Yeah, listening intently.
Do you want to go from
yes,
mode to speak mode? Do you want the conch for a few minutes?
Yeah, anything specific that anyone wants me to cover, or literally just jump into it and have a bit of a waffle?
Fire away.
Fire away. Cool. Okay, so
free reign.
Brilliant. Okay, so in terms of what's been happening the last couple of days, it's been probably the worst 2 days in terms of business, easily. Very, very stressful. I'm just going to come out of the kitchen because some of the dryers running. It's been a very stressful couple of days. So the first point to make, which is probably the scariest point, is that the Scottish Land Registry closed today, which means that as of today, or as of earlier today, no transactions can be completed within Scotland unless they're, well, even potentially refinances and things are going to be difficult. So we've had a couple of deals this morning that we're going through in Scotland that have now completely ceased to continue because of that. The worry is if that then moves into England, obviously, I don't need to say what we're all thinking, but yeah, if that moves into England, obviously that's going to have a devastating effect, and we'll close all current transactions potentially. So that was the first thing that came out today. In terms of valuations being cancelled, we're not actually seeing that. So we're seeing quite the opposite actually. So in terms of the transactions we got through, and don't get me wrong, I'm one broker out of however many there are, 60, 70,000 of us within this country. So I only represent a very small niche, but from our perspective, we act on a lot of land deals, a lot of refurb deals, and similarly some sort of vanilla deals. We're seeing valuers actually be quite proactive during this period of time. So, for example, I had an email from LSH this morning, which is Lambert Smith Hampton, who have said that they'll continue to work their valuations as long as they can be safe in the knowledge that if it's that no one's going to meet them on site, essentially. They're also going to be carrying out desktop valuations where possible as well. So another thing that we've seen today is a lot of lenders be proactive in terms of actually beginning to accept desktop valuations. Now, that's not always the ideal scenario, but some are moving towards allowing that. So there's already been some movements within actually bringing lending to within the 21st century, which is quite nice. From solicitors' point of view, we're also starting to see lenders actually move to the point where they'll allow solicitors to conduct ID calls, paper signing calls, whatever it may be, over a Zoom call or some sort of FaceTime, whatever it may be. So the need to actually physically go and have a meeting with the solicitor isn't such an issue now. Again, I only represent a finite amount of investors and developers, but this is what we're seeing in the market. So in terms of lender movements, which is probably what you're all a bit more interested in, I would imagine. So what we've seen today is, I suppose, quite a quick drop in loan to values, but not as substantial. And when I say quick drop in, I don't mean large drops. I just mean quick in the sense of they've all been very quick to react in terms of what they're actually doing. So most lenders have dropped an average of about 5% loan to value on bridging development. In fact, actually on buy-to-lets, we've not really seen, and we're again a finite number of lenders that we deal with on buy-to-let, but we've not seen a drop from the 75% loan to values. Now, there are lenders who have dropped from 75 to 60, from 75 to 50, whatever it may be. But there are still guys who are very actively still lending, still at the same parameters that they were pre-virus, and still looking to get money out the door. And that's the same with development finance, that's the same with bridging finance, that there are guys who are still lending at the levels that we were used to, well, as little as a week ago. But again, there are some that have dropped. Now, the other thing that we've seen as well is that actually the experience parameters have changed slightly with some lenders. So we were very niched in terms of assisting first-time developers and first-time investors. I think that's going to be quite difficult moving forward, because they want to see developers and investors who are experienced. So getting that first step on the ladder could potentially be slightly more difficult now. Not impossible, but slightly more difficult. And then lastly, the other thing that we've seen is large transactions have become difficult to place. So I've been dealing today, literally all day, trying to place a £2 million facility in Norwich. And the problem is that most lenders have moved their maximum facilities to 1.5 million. Some are still at sort of 2 million plus, but they're very, very picky on what they now want on their loan books. In terms of lenders actually completely closing their door, obviously some of you will have seen today that Together have entirely closed their door to new business. We've got 2 or 3 others who have closed their doors to new business as well. My worry with that is actually you're not getting the full picture when it comes out, because if a lender has had to shut their doors entirely, sorry, you'll have to give the crying in the background. I've got the same issue as Rob. I've got a newborn baby. So in terms of, he does that, he knocks me off kilter when he cries as well. I forgot what I was saying now. Anyone got a prompt that they can do to remind me what I was talking about?
Some lenders have closed their doors.
You were talking about Together shutting down.
Yes, that's it. Yeah. So in terms of them announcing that they've closed their door to new business, my only worry with that is that if they've had to close their door to new business within, I suppose, weeks of the virus becoming the economic issue that it is now, I don't think we're quite getting the full picture. So the lenders who are reducing their loan to values and maybe increasing their interest rates, they're the ones who have just become more risk adverse, are just trying to play it a bit safer, obviously just see out what's occurring in the market. The guys who've closed their doors, I think it will probably come to light later on down the line that there was maybe not some great stuff on the loan book, which is why they've had to close in order to just, I think, just have a look through that loan book and just check what they were actually lending out at. In particular, a couple of the others that we've seen close their doors are the guys who were at 80% loan to value on bridging loans, and that's 80% of market value as well. Now, I mean, you can't feasibly operate at 80% of market value and still be able to operate at that level in a moment like this. And I think the reason they've had to close their doors is purely because with that much leverage on the loan book, it's not a case of just dropping the loan to value and carrying on as normal. I think it's got to be a case of cease trading and wait and see what happens and just take stock at that point and work out exactly where you are.
Thanks, Michael.
Yeah, I suppose I was going to say, in summary, lenders are working. Most lenders are business as usual. Some have dropped their loan to values, some have closed their doors. But I think long and short of it is, if you've got a deal that stacks, then there'll be someone out there that will finance it. You might just find that it's slightly more expensive, and you might need a slightly bigger deposit than you did sort of 2 weeks ago.
And I think if you've got something on the table that you need to take, grab it while you can. Because the message from Michael there is things are changing all the time. Okay, guys, thank you very much. We've been going for 2 hours and a bit. We still have 55 odd people and getting on for 60 people on the call. That's pretty amazing dedication. Hopefully you found this useful. Thank you to everybody who asked the question. Thank you to everybody who joined and contributed our panel of intrepid property experts or interested parties who contributed far and wide, up and down the country. Thank you to Chris for beating the distance record for contributing from Spain. I think in terms of most miles traveled, at my in-person property meeting, I normally give a prize for the most miles traveled. Tim on this call is always in with a good shout for that, coming to Southampton from Brighton. Chris would absolutely wipe the floor with the rest of us. Hopefully that was useful. I think, you know, in the absence of face-to-face networking, maybe we can forgive the odd bandwidth issue here and there, given the value that this group has brought together. Thank you very much for coming. Given how long we've been going, I may look to put future events on in other ways at other times. I'm really interested in hearing your feedback on what was useful, what didn't work. Always want to know how we can improve and do better. Thank you very much, everybody.
I think also, Rob, I see lots of people on the group chat are saying thank you to you. So a big thank you, because it's a great thing to do to put this together. And I'd be very happy to do this every week as a point of sanity for having a chat with people outside of my household. I live on my own, talking to myself. So I don't know, maybe that's worth thinking about. Maybe you could put an email out or a message out to canvass everyone, see if that's a good idea, maybe 2 weekly. But thank you very much for doing it, Rob. It's insightful, and it's a sort of virtual hug, effectively, that we're all in this shit together.
A virtual hug for everybody, yes. And hopefully this is a way of the future. Okay, well, I'll thank you everybody for those kind words. I'll look to see what we can do going forward. Richard just posted that he does lots of lives. I'm sure I know Rob H does lots of stuff on Instagram with his team. There's lots of really genuine property people putting really good content out there who are happy to help and talk and reciprocate with a virtual hug back to you all. So thank you very much. I'm going to close the call now, and I look forward to speaking to you all soon. Thanks a lot, guys. Goodbye.
Bye.